The crimes and their preparation with which the Sabbat is associated have a wealth of social repercussions. Among them can be found the abominations traditionally attributed to the Jews in Christian countries, and before them to the Christians in the Roman Empire. They always include ritual infanticide, religious profanation, incestuous relationships, and bestiality. Food poisoning as well. Food poisoning as well as offenses against influential or prestigious citizens always play a significant role. Consequently, despite her personal insignificance, a witch is engaged in activities that can potentially affect the whole of society. This explains why the devil and his demons are not disdainful of such an alliance. I will say no more about stereotypical accusations. It is easy to recognize the crisis caused by the lack of differentiation as the second stereotype and its link to the first. I turn now to the third stereotype. The crowd's choice of victims may be totally random, but it is not necessarily so. It is even possible that the crimes of which they are accused are real, but that sometimes the persecutors choose their victims because they belong to a class that is particularly susceptible to persecution, rather than because of the crimes they have committed. The Jews are among those accused by Guillaume de Machat of poisoning the rivers. Of all the indications he gives us, this is for us the most valuable, the one that most reveals the distortion of persecution. Within the context of other imaginary and real stereotypes, we know that this stereotype must be real. In fact, in modern Western society, Jews have frequently been persecuted. Ethnic and religious minorities tend to polarize the majorities against themselves. In this, we see one of the criteria by which victims are selected. Which, though relative to the individual society, is transcultural in principle. There are very few societies that do not subject their minorities all the poorly integrated or merely distinct groups, to certain forms of discrimination and even persecution. In India, the Muslims are persecuted. In Pakistan, the Hindus. There are therefore universal signs for the selection of victims, and they constitute our third stereotype. In addition to cultural and religious, there are purely physical criteria. Sickness, madness, genetic deformities, accidental injuries, and even disabilities in general tend to polarize persecutors. We need only look around or within to understand the universality. Even today, people cannot control a momentary recoil from physical abnormality. The very word abnormal, like the word plague in the Middle Ages, is something of a taboo. It is both noble and cursed, sacer in all senses of the word. It is considered more fitting in English to replace it with the word handicapped. The handicapped are subject to discriminatory measures that make them victims, out of all proportion to the extent to which their presence disturbs the ease of social exchange. One of the great qualities of our society is that it now feels obliged to take measures for their benefit. Disability belongs to a large group of banal signs of a victim, and among certain groups, in a boarding school, for example, every individual who has difficulty adapting, someone from another country or state, an orphan, an only son, someone who is penniless, or even simply the latest arrival, is more or less interchangeable with a cripple. If the disability or deformity is real, it tends to polarize, quote, primitive, end of quote, people against the afflicted person. Similarly, if a group of people is used to choosing its victims from a certain social, ethnic, or religious category, it tends to attribute to them disabilities of deformities that would reinforce the polarization against the victim. Were they real? This tendency is clearly observable in racist cartoons. The abnormality need not only be physical. In any area of existence or behavior, abnormality may function as the criterion for selecting those to be persecuted. For example, there is such a thing as social abnormality. Here, the average defines the norm. The further one is from normal social status of whatever kind, the greater the risk of persecution. This is easy to see in relation to those at the bottom of the social ladder. Diddly-idiot. This is less obvious when we add another marginal group to the poor and outsiders, the marginal insider, the rich and powerful. The monarch and his court are often reminiscent of the eye of the hurricane. This double marginality is indicative of a social organization in turmoil. In normal times, the rich and powerful enjoy all sorts of protection and privileges which the disinherited lack. We are concerned here not with normal circumstances, but with periods of crisis. A mere glance at world history will reveal that the odds of a violent death at the hands of a frenzied crowd are statistically greater for the privileged than for any other category. Extreme characteristics ultimately attract collective destruction at some time or other. Extremes not just of wealth or poverty, but also of success and failure, beauty and ugliness, vice and virtue, and ability to please and to displease. The weakness of women, children, and old people, as well as the strength of the most powerful, becomes weakness in the face of the crowd. Crowds commonly turn on those who originally held exceptional power over them. No doubt some people will be shocked to find the rich and powerful listed among the victims of collective persecution under the same title as the poor and weak. The two phenomena are not symmetrical in their eyes. The rich and powerful exert an influence over society which justifies the acts of violence to which they are subjected in times of crisis. This is the holy revolt of the oppressed. Wow. The borderline between rational discrimination and arbitrary persecution is sometimes difficult to trace. For political, moral, and medical reasons, certain forms of discrimination strike us as reasonable today, yet they are similar to the ancient forms of persecution. For example, the quarantine of anyone who might be contagious during an epidemic. In the Middle Ages, doctors were hostile to the idea that the plague could spread through physical contact with the diseased. Generally, they belonged to the enlightened group, and any theory of contagion smacked too much of a persecutor's prejudice not to be suspect. And yet these doctors were wrong. For the idea of contagion to become established in the 19th century in a purely medical context, devoid of any association with persecution, it was necessary for there to be no suspicion that it was the return of prejudice in a new disguise. This is an interesting question, but has nothing to do with our present work. My only goal is to enumerate the qualities that tend to polarize violent crowds against those who possess them. The examples I have given unquestionably belong in this category. The fact that some of these acts of violence might even be justifiable today is not really important to the line of analysis I am pursuing. I am not seeking to set exact boundaries to the field of persecution, nor am I trying to determine precisely where injustice begins or ends. Contrary to what some think, I am not interested in defining what is good and bad in the social and cultural order. My only concern is to show that the pattern of collective violence crosses cultures and that its broad contours are easily outlined. It is one thing to recognize the existence of this pattern, another to establish its relevance. In some cases, this is difficult to determine, but the proof I am looking for is not affected by such difficulty. If a stereotype of persecution cannot be clearly recognized in a particular detail of a specific event, the solution does not rest only with this particular detail in an isolated context. We must determine whether or not the other stereotypes are present along with the detail in question. Let us look at two examples. Most historians consider that the French monarchy bears some responsibility for the revolution in 1789. Does Marie Antoinette's execution therefore lie outside our pattern? The queen belongs to several familiar categories of victims of persecution. She's not only a queen, but a foreigner. Her Austrian origin is mentioned repeatedly in the popular accusations against her. The court that condemns her is heavily influenced by the Paris mob. Our first stereotype can also be found. All the characteristics of the great crisis that provoked collective persecution are discernible in the French Revolution. To be sure, historians are not in the habit of dealing with the details of the French Revolution as stereotypes of the one general pattern of persecution. I do not suggest that we should substitute this way of thinking in all our ideas about the French Revolution. Nonetheless, it sheds interesting light on an accusation which is often passed over but which figures explicitly in the Queen's trial, that of having committed incest with her son.